If you use numbers daily, you're doing math.
If you observe the world around you and ask questions, you're doing science.
If you talk about the past, you're doing history.
And if you think about God, ask questions about life, or wonder what's true, guess what?
You're doing theology.
And if you're a teenager, that makes you a teenologian.
Theology matters because it's not just about what you believe in your head.
It's about how you live your life.
What you believe about God shapes everything.
How you see yourself.
How you treat other people.
How you handle life's challenges.
Even if you don't think about it much, you're already living out some theology daily.
Good theology serves as a firm foundation for living with clarity, courage, and purpose.
Not just someday when you're older, but right now.
Welcome to the Teenologians podcast, where I, your host and Bible teacher, Mr. Duna, dialogue with teenagers about the practical outliving of theology. High school student Brinley rejoins me for a discussion about anxiety. Is it a sin to be anxious? We talked about the role that social media, especially Instagram, contributes to anxiety among young people, particularly regarding physical appearance and social acceptance. The conversation also touched on the deeper roots of anxiety, such as the need for affirmation and the impact of unhealthy relationships. Using the biblical story of Hannah to illustrate the search for identity and worth beyond material possessions and external validation. Let's visit that conversation. Today, Brinley wants to talk about anxiety. The first thing that comes to mind is Matthew chapter 5. Actually, it's not Matthew chapter 5, it's Matthew chapter 6. Now, what we have in Matthew chapter 5...
Don't worry about it. It shows, the listeners that we're actually a real school.
I might just keep that in there.
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
It shows hey, we are a real school. We're not like a big budget. We're relatable. We're trying to talk to you
we don't
guys.
have a studio.
We don't. But we have a pretty nice setup right now, if you could see.
When you asked about anxiety, and I think you were saying something to the effect that there are Christians who tell other Christians who are experiencing anxiety that it's sinful and it's evidence of a lack of faith in God.
Yes.
I think that can be true, but I think we need to be careful about a one size fits all approach. So let's just start with basics, and let's start with the fact that Jesus did address this issue. And the context is that Jesus, well, let me just give you some context.
Edward Eichelberger for dismissal, please. Edward Eichelberger for dismissal.
Here we go
Thank
again.
you.
I think it adds. I kind of like that.
The background.
It's fun.
Okay, so look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 1.
Okay.
So here's the context. Seeing the crowds, that is, Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And what we see in the following chapters is Jesus, he doesn't introduce any new teaching because Jesus' Bible is the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. They don't call it the Old Testament at that time. They call it the Law of Moses. They call it another section they call the prophets. Mm-hmm. Another section they call the writings. And I think Jews would call it the Tanakh when it's all put together. I'm not sure what Jesus calls it except the scriptures. He also calls it the writings and the prophets and Moses. He would never refer to it as the Old Testament. We do that, okay, because we do that in hindsight and we're at a different point in history. It's important to know that Jesus isn't introducing anything new. What he's doing is he's taking the scriptures that had been misunderstood and misapplied by the religious leaders, and Jesus is teaching the right view of the scriptures. Mm-hmm. And when we get to about chapter 6, verse 19, he begins talking about material possessions, or rather the accumulation of wealth, which in and of itself isn't sinful. Is it wrong to save up money for retirement? Is it wrong to try to have enough to make sure that you're able to support those under you, those with you? What do you think, Brinley?
It's definitely not,
Mm-hmm.
because again, God looks at the motive in your heart. And if you're doing it in a materialistic way, if you're achieving all these things in a materialistic way, that's when it's sinful. But if you're trying to, like you said, save up for your family, save up for retirement, that is not inherently sinful.
Okay, so let's look at verse 19. He says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth." Well, where else would we lay up treasures?
I have no idea. Maybe heaven?
Yes. And how do you do that?
Well, I mean, you have to know Christ.
You have to know Christ. Okay, so it sounds like he's going to go the route of saying that don't put all of your eggs in one basket, meaning that don't treat this life as if it's the only life, so that you put all of your stock here with no thought to what happens after this life. So he says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. And here's why, because riches are uncertain, right? He says, where moth and rust destroy, right? You buy a brand new vehicle, you're excited about it, it's your pride and joy, and then a few years later it's rusting. Moth destroys clothing, and where thieves break in and steal, which I have been a victim of home break-ins and having my car stolen, and our church was broken into. They stole their sound gear, computers, and
I did not know that about you.
They did it twice at our church, and they did it twice in my house.
At Church of Grace?
Yes. So, yeah.
That's crazy.
So I know all about that. But he says, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Meaning that whatever you value, that's what you spend your time and energy on. And so if it's earthly riches and it's only that, your life is going to be consumed with that.
Yes.
And then here's an interesting verse. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Brinley, what's the connection? Because these are not disconnected thoughts. What is the eye?
Like the eye, like, are they talking?
Like he says the eye, your eyeball. What do we do with our eyes?
Well, we see with our eyes. So
Okay.
if we're fixing our eyes upon things that are unhealthy, then that just shows where your heart is at.
I think here, Brinley, what it means is that the eye is not necessarily your eyeball. He's using the eye and the body as a symbol of your worldview. What is your view of riches? And if you have a wrong view of material wealth, as in this life is all there is, and earthly treasures are the only ones that matter, then you have a bad eye. You're not seeing things right. I think that's what he means. So why do people experience anxiety? In the context, Jesus is about to mention anxiety, and it's related to this. So he says, no one can serve two masters. Don't you find it interesting that he's going to identify money as one master and then God another master?
Yes.
No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. And so here's the conclusion of the matter. You cannot serve God and money. The wrong conclusion would be also it's not good to have money. That is not what he said. He said you cannot make money
An idol.
An idol. That's
Yes.
exactly right. So that money is now mastering you rather than you mastering money. So there's a difference between serving money, that's what Jesus is talking about, and money serving you, which is the right view. And so you can serve God with money, but you cannot serve God and money.
Yeah, and I think a good example of serving God with money is that we are told to tithe. We're told to give our help and money to the poor or people who are struggling. And that's an example of us serving God with our money, but not serving money in itself.
That's right. What else does money give us? What can, I mean, eating, right? Sometimes we don't make the best eating choices.
Yeah.
Because I'm having
I wonder who.
Yeah, I ate Whataburger and it was terrible. Okay. He mentions anxiety in this context. So immediately we know that the kind of anxiety Jesus is talking about is a kind of anxiety that people experience when they are concerned with how they're going to make a living. Because he says, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? And some people would say, no, that's life. Cosmetics, style, fashion, eating. What is it? Live, love, eat. I don't know. There's a popular saying.
Live, love, eat is so. That's not it, but that's hilarious.
What is the saying?
Like, what do you mean? Like, live, laugh, love? Live, laugh, eat is not a saying.
Well, whenever
That'd be perfect for like a white girl kitchen.
Yes, but every time I hear that, live, laugh, love, it always involves food. You never seen that?
It's literally that is in my mother's kitchen right now.
Yeah.
She is a Hobby Lobby mom. Love you, Mom.
Yeah, that's very white of you. Anyways.
I said it first. It's okay.
Okay, so Brinley, it's very obvious from the context that Jesus is talking about do not be anxious.
Can I get this Wagner boys for dismissal, please? Wagner boys for dismissal. Thank you.
It is towards the end of the day, and that's why we're hearing that more often.
Yes.
Do you think that much of the anxiety, Brinley, that people experience, even though they may not think it is related, maybe at the root level, to some of these things?
Yes.
We have read that this current young generation is the most anxious, depressed, a very poor outlook on life, and social media, especially Instagram some years ago, has played a major role of that anxiety.
Yes.
So can we make any connections between, or we can attempt to, I'm not a young female, okay, neither do I identify as one.
I'm glad.
Yeah, the bearded lady over here.
That'd be scary.
You as a young teenager, what are some of the anxieties? Take one for the team, right? Expose everybody.
I'm not scared.
What are young girls worried about in terms of their image on Instagram?
So speaking for myself specifically as someone who is a young girl, something that really affected me was how you look. That's a big thing they focus on. A big thing they focus on is physical appearance. Will they like me if I'm wearing this?
Okay.
Will they like me if I look like this?
You
Do
see
I
what
need
you did?
makeup?
You see what you did?
What did I do?
You appealed to one of these categories.
I know.
Did you see that?
Yes.
So,
What do you wear? What you will wear. That's one of them.
But the thing is that in Jesus's day, they view clothing not in the exact same way. Typically, in ancient times, people had a very limited wardrobe. You had a wardrobe that you used to work in, your daily, and then you had one wardrobe for special occasions. Sometimes people didn't have the outfits for special occasions. So if somebody would throw a wedding, sometimes wedding garments were provided so that guests could be appropriately dressed.
Oh, wow.
We, however, have an abundance of clothing.
Yes.
So our anxiety for clothing. So when someone in Bible time says, I don't have anything to wear, they literally mean that. But when we say, I don't really have anything to wear, we don't
mean that.
We don't really mean it. We don't have, there's nothing that I'd like for me at the moment for this occasion. Okay, so then we don't wear clothing just for the sake of covering up. There's a certain image that we want to project
Yes.
with our clothing. I think that by principle, when Jesus says, do not worry about what you will wear, what is at the root of worrying about what you will wear in our current context, especially when it comes to extending our image on social media? And you were beginning to get into that until I rudely interrupted.
How could you?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I think that right now there's a big influx in trends. So trends are a big thing on social media. It's how you get engagement. It's how you get views. It's how people see you. So if you're wearing something that's not quote unquote trendy, you feel left out, you feel left behind. And again, like you said, when somebody says,
why do you care? I don't mean you in particular.
why do they care?
But why do people in general care?
Because not everybody knows Christ. So people will be judgmental. People will say things and make comments.
Okay, well,
And that's why.
let me re-ask that. You are a young female.
Okay.
And well, of course you are. No, I mean, I'm trying to paint a picture. So you have a young girl who doesn't know Christ, because even Christian young females experience this anxiety and worry.
Oh, yeah.
But for you might say, well, I need to focus on Christ. But what are they trying to gain from other people? when they put their image out on social media that's going to make them feel good? And why do they feel that need is what I'm asking.
Like in cases of like engagement or like acceptance, do you mean? Because if somebody, if they're posting and they don't know Christ and they're posting a specific way, it's because they want people to like them. Like they want to fit in. They want to seem normal. And I've definitely went through that. It's like you have to dress a certain way, you have to be a certain way because what will people think about you if you're not in the most modern clothes or stuff like that? Or what exactly do you mean by that?
I'm trying to get at our human felt need to be affirmed by others.
Oh, yeah.
Is that coming from a healthy place, or is it coming from a void in us wherein we recognize there's something lacking in us in terms of how we feel about ourselves, and we need someone else to fill that void and affirm us and tell us that, yes, you look great. Yes, you're good looking. You're a good whatever it is that you might want to be affirmed in.
Yeah.
What is that?
I mean, yes, we look for that. There's a void there that we feel like we need someone else's attention or someone else, like you said, being affirmed. Because when we don't have that, it's like you feel like there's a missing void. Like, why am I different?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it felt like for me. I can't speak for anybody else, but I can tell you that personally, there was a void that I was missing. I felt completely left out, and I had no idea what my purpose was.
But your parents love you.
Of course my
Your
parents
dad loves you.
I love my dad. Shout out, Dad.
Your mom loves you.
Yes, but
So my question
unfortunately-
is, and I'm asking this not just you personally.
Yeah.
I'm asking this so that listeners can think about it and engage in some self-examination. You know what? Let me tell you a story. This is not necessarily the same thing, but let's turn to the book of 1 Samuel. Let's turn to the book of 1 Samuel, and this is fresh in my head because we covered it earlier in one of the classes.
Wasn't it ours?
Yes,
It was ours.
Yes. Okay. You see how bad my memory is. Okay. You see what Whataburger does? No, that was pre Whataburger.
It's you and the food you eat every
Yeah.
time. You're like,
Be quiet.
every Friday.
Because
This happened last Friday too.
Yes, I have to watch what I eat so I can feel well. And today I ordered fast food, and it was not good. I usually don't eat the fries, but it's not good. Okay. One time I was talking with a female student here on campus, and I noticed certain behavior. And because I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with the student, I asked, this is some years ago, may I ask you a question without you getting offended? And I asked that person, why do you tend to form friendships with boys and you gravitate toward them and not so much girls? You find yourself more at home with the boys. And I know that she's not being inappropriate, so she's not being boy crazy in the full sense, but she admitted that she does have female friends, but she said that there is something that a young man provides in terms of friendship and comfort that she cannot get from a female relationship.
How so? What do you mean?
I don't know. That's what I was asking. And I think there's some truth there. I think that relationships are different by God's design. And so you're going to receive a kind of comfort from your dad.
Oh, yeah.
That is not a comfort from your mom. So your mom will comfort you in another way, in a way that's in keeping with her femininity and her nurturing care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But your dad will provide more of a sense of security and, my dad's got me.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
For me, I had a big brother. So I can say that both about my mom and dad. But I also had a sense of comfort from my older brother. And then my younger brother, I related to him differently in that I felt more like the protector. Mm-hmm. So my point is that different human relationships are meant to feel differently.
Yeah.
I think what she was alluding to is there might be some, I've noticed, and this is just me, okay? I'm not a trained professional in this area. So I'm speaking strictly from my experience as a pastor, my experience as a dad, just a man in general. There seems to be some kind of association that when a young lady does not have a good relationship with her father, there's a natural tendency to try to seek that male affirmation somewhere else. And I don't think that's healthy for relationships. And I'm saying that to say that I think that can also be connected somehow to anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
So whenever we don't have healthy relationships, there's a sense of incompleteness in us. And we feel that void, and because we're not the best at self-diagnosing, we're trying to reach or attain those things that we think might be the answer, and then it proves disastrous and it's not. So here's one. It is a very natural thing for a woman to want to be a mother.
Yeah.
So, at a time when in Israel's history, the book of 1 Samuel gives us this story of a man who has 2 wives, which is outside of God's design. We're not going to go into why does he have 2 wives. That's just a fact of history. He does. And this is a terrible story because one woman women can be very cruel to each other. And so it says that this man used to go up year by year from his city to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts at Shiloh. So this man, Shiloh is where God's tabernacle is. And so they would travel yearly. So this is a religious family. Mm-hmm. This is a praying family. This is a family that worships God in a very formal way. And the Bible says that every year that he would go to Shiloh to sacrifice to God, to worship. Verse 4, it says, on the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. So one wife has multiple children, sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion of the food because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Mm-hmm. So in ancient times, if a woman could not bear children, she felt worthless. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so do you think she's experiencing anxiety? Do you think these trips are not a cause for joy, but a cause for anxiety and
dread?
And dread.
Yes. Because that's hurtful. You see your husband's other wife with multiple sons and daughters, like the scripture says, and your womb is closed. So obviously that's a cause for dread and definitely a source of anxiety.
Now, her husband can't do anything for her because clearly the problem is not him, because he does have sons and daughters with another woman. But with Hannah, he has not been able to have children. And she's pretty upset about this. And to make it worse, listen to what happens. It says, and her rival, meaning the rival wife, used to provoke her grievously to irritate her because the Lord had closed her womb. Mm-hmm. So the rival wife uses this religious trip as an occasion to really make Hannah feel even more terribly. Yeah. That's pretty evil.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's bad. Not only does she have to deal with her throughout the year, but hey, this year we're going back to Shiloh where we're going to sacrifice and worship God, and me and my sons and my daughters are going to eat, but don't worry. Elkanah will give you some extra food.
He'll give you double portions.
Yeah. But so her rival is just really making it worse. So she's miserable. Wow. So do you think she was feeling anxiety before the trip?
Yes.
Of course she was. Before, during, and after. So what's the source of her anxiety?
The source of her anxiety is that she can't have children, and they keep praying for this, but her womb is closed.
But what conclusions do you think Hannah has reached about her state of...
That she's worthless because she can't have children?
So do you think she's basing her worth on having children? If I have children, then I am a person of value, right?
Yes, that's what she's thinking, but we have value because we're made in God's image.
But she's not thinking that.
Yeah, but
she's thinking I'm worthless because I can't even bear children.
That's so sad. So
my question is, if you leave it to Hannah, what's the solution for her anxiety and for her mental health? What is
conceiving a child?
Okay. And then she feels valuable now because now she has a child. But that would be her solution, right? Mm-hmm. Is that a good solution?
No.
Because her value should be based on something else, right?
Yes.
Okay, now Elkanah offers a solution, but it's not good enough. Listen to what he says to her. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat.
This is horrible. Oh my goodness.
This is going on for years.
And the husband didn't get on
I
the
don't-
rival wife at all?
Well, listen to what he says to her.
Husband of the year.
Yeah. And Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Listen. And why do you not eat? And why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons? So if you leave it up to Hannah, she's going to find her value and her worth in conceiving and bearing a child.
Yes.
But since that's not happening, Elkanah is asking her to shift her sense of self-worth in that you have me and I give you value. But that's also a wrong solution because
Yes.
your value
Is from God. 'Cause
not
we're-
from another man. So
Yes.
I was speaking to, by the way, every story I tell is true. I'm not making this up.
This is my favorite segment of the podcast is when you something about like listeners, something about Mr. DeLuna is he has a story for every circumstance you could ever need. It is the best part of the podcast because it's always
being a
crazy.
student.
Yes, I love being a student and coming to your class because you always have a way to give an example from the Bible in your own way. So
Yeah, I think
yes.
Miss Setliff pointed that out in chapel about the story about the coat jackets in the classroom being in the
Yes.
yeah. So so just give me a few minutes.
Another real life.
Yeah.
Someone just came in.
Yeah, because the bell's about to ring for after school dismissal. Okay, this is really important. So if you leave it up to Hannah, her worth is in bearing a child. If you leave it up to the husband, he say, no, find your worth in me. And I was talking to an adult, this woman, it sounds right, this woman, right?
This woman.
No, last year, and I was sharing with her something about this, not this story, but about where we find our worth. And she started crying in front of me. And she was weeping, and I said, what's going on? And she said, because you're confirming something that I have been struggling with, and I think this is the answer. She said, I have been with my husband since I was a teenager, and when I got married, I wanted to be the best wife I could be, and she has been.
That's amazing.
But they've had multiple children together, and she has grandchildren, and she's still young. She's still like barely made it to 50. So she's not an old lady.
Yeah.
Right. But it began to dawn on her that she's known as so-and-so's wife. Like she doesn't have her own individual identity.
Yes.
And she said that began to bother her because she said, I began to think about, what if my husband dies? Who am I? So-and-so's widow? So her identity was connected to her being married to a certain individual. And she said, I want to be my own person. Like I want to be known for who I am as a person, not who I'm married to. Now she loves her husband,
Yes.
but she recognized that for all these decades, her entire identity had been wrapped up in her husband.
Yeah.
And there's a sense in which marriage unites two people and the two shall become one, but we still need to maintain our individual identity before God, right?
Yes.
And so having a child isn't it. So you don't find your identity in motherhood, in being a wife. And I think something happens that I think the reader misses. So it says that she is, as she continued praying before the Lord, right? She's weeping. And this is what she tells God in verse 11. So she goes to the temple and she starts to pray and she's seeking God. And she says, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. Why is she willing to give him away now? If she has a son and she gives him away, then it wasn't really about...
The child, but just being a mother is what you're trying to say?
I'm thinking that she was interpreting her lack of conception as this is evidence that you and I, God, are not right.
Oh.
And if I have a child, that's like God no longer frowning upon me. And to prove that for me, it's not about this kid, it's about you, I'll just give him back to you. So it's almost as if Hannah recognizes that that her real issue isn't, I cannot conceive children. She sees her lack of conception as a symptom of a deeper issue, and that is things are not right between God and I.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because she gives them away back to God, right?
Yes.
She gives them away. And so that's something to think about. Did you need
What do you-
something?
Wait, so what do you think about that perception? Like,
I think that's what's going on.
yeah.
I think that's what's going on. And so, and what I was trying to get to is that I think at the root of it, anxiety has a root. And I don't think people work hard enough to try to get at what's really happening. So
Yeah.
okay, social media and Instagram, and I'm worried about, I'm experiencing anxiety. Well, why? Well, because of my image. Why are you concerned about your image? Is it because you want glory from people?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you not content with how God sees you?
Yeah. That definitely is.
It's not that easy to accept. Here's one. If a person is famous and the whole world knows them, but God doesn't know them, then it's no good.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't Jesus say, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and yet forfeits his soul? So you could say fame. So this person is known by the whole world, and yet when they appear before God, he says, away from me, I never knew you. So the only one that matters is God.
Yes.
It's better to be known by God and unknown to the world than to be known by the world and unknown by God.
I think that's something that a lot of people, especially young girls, have to remember
Mm-hmm.
because they believe so intensely about what other people say. I feel like that's definitely a struggle, is that they really are relying on what other people say about them.
But it's
instead
easier
of-
said than done to get over that,
Oh,
right?
definitely. I have struggled with this so long.
It gets easier as you get older, actually, that area. When you get in your 40s, you no longer care anymore.
I love that.
Right, Bentley? Yeah, he knows. He's 42, Bentley.
I thought Bentley was. I thought he was freshly 60.
Yeah.
That's rough.
He's about to start collecting Social Security. Yeah.
But that's definitely something we have to remember, especially as teenage girls, because that's a hard time in a girl's life, is being young and stuff like that. I mean, you can't relate to that, Mr. DeLunas,
Yeah, I know.
unfortunately.
Brinley, we are out of time. We are going to have to do this again and pick up on this topic because I think we just scratched the surface, but
Oh, yeah.
I've got to dismiss kids. And thank you again for being on the podcast.
Thank you. Bye.